Our next speaker is Dr. Brad Donahue. Dr. Donahue received a PhD from Nova Southeastern University and currently holds the rank of Professor of Psychology at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Dr. Donahue is Director of Family Research and Services, which is chiefly focused on the development, evaluation, and dissemination of family-supported interventions to assist in goal achievement. He is one of the developers of Family Behavioral Therapy, FBT, and evidence-based treatment listed in many national clearinghouses. His specific interests include the development and adoption of evidence-based treatments, primarily FBT, psychometric development of clinical measures to assist in understanding and measuring treatment outcomes, and improving the functioning of mental health clinics through effective supervision and quality assurance. Those primary interests concern troubled populations, for example, substance abuse, child maltreatment, family violence, and conduct disorders. He is also interested in the concurrent improvement of mental health and sports performance in athletes. Dr. Donahue has published over 120 manuscripts, is a recipient of the Western Psychological Association Early Career Research Award, the UNLV Barrick Scholar Award for Distinguished Research, the UNLV Alumni Association's Outstanding Faculty Award, and Student Focused Award. His many projects have been funded by national agencies such as NIDA, NIMH, and Samsung. Please help him welcome.
It was just such a pleasure, listening, to you guys talk about the earlier days. I used to love just standing there listening to Nate talk about the old days. It was, incredible and so motivating for me as a graduate student. I basically had the pleasure of working with Nate when I was, pretty much throughout my graduate school. He was my mentor, and then some of my internship, and then my couple of years in postdoc, and then for about 10 years, 15 actually, after that, as a colleague. I was the first person I wanted to call when I got this grant from NIDA to do an R01, and he was right there with me as a consultant. So I've had a wonderful opportunity to get to know him in those kind of contexts. And then in addition, it's funny, but I went to school with his son, and his daughter, his future daughter-in-law, and so I got to know him in another context too, going to these wonderful parties that were known throughout Fort Lauderdale as being the best ones, I think, down there. So it was great in many different ways. I found out about Nate Azrin. I was at the University of Kansas and Montville. I was in a class with him, and he talked about just brilliance and positive, thinking and reinforcing. Well, he was that person too. And I went to him after one of the classes, and I think it was, I can't remember who it was that was up there on a film, but one of Nate's students, and I basically said, hey, that was amazing. I'm in pre-med right now, and I've just never seen anything like that. I'd like to do that. And he said, well, he said, where do you want to go for grad school? And I said, well, I was thinking Southeast. And he goes, well, you got to go down to work with Nate Azrin. So I went ahead and interviewed with him, and I know his family knows about this story, but it just blows me away that I went down there and I interviewed with him. And I remember I had done a paper on alcoholism because he had just gotten a grant to do the first drug abuse treatment for NIDA, on a behavioral therapy. And, so I went and did this literature review on alcoholism, and with adolescents, I should say. And so I showed him this paper, and I know that I was, not a good writer back then. I mean, terrible, actually. Now I'm okay. I'm an editor at a journal, and, I've gotten through enough of that stuff, but at the time it was just really not very good. And, he looked at this paper, and he read it for just a little bit, and then he looks up and he says, well, this is just an incredible paper. Do you mind if I should file this in case I should need to come in and reference it in the future? And I said, oh, no, of course not. And he always had that as a way of him to make you feel as if you were 10 feet tall and could do anything. And actually, he made me believe him that in actuality it was a good paper. Like, I believed him. and it was not. Okay. As I watched him kind of file that paper, I just walked out of that room and I said, I've got to work with him. I don't care. That's the most positive person I think I've met in a long time, and as I turned out, I think probably my life. He's just incredible. So I basically started to work with him on this grant for NIDA, and it was so amazing. At first we had Paul McMahon and Kevin Lipinski, and Vicki Bessalel was his wife was one of our supervisors, and we just had a blast. We'd sit around and kind of come up with these really innovative, kinds of interventions, and of course, he always had a way of making us think as if we had developed these ideas, when in actuality he asked just the right questions, and he kind of just moved you in the right direction to make you actually feel that, that had happened, when in actuality, of course, he knew, the answer to these questions, 10 times back. So that was always, I thought, pretty cool. And then we had Evan Kogan and Ronna Cherno joined us, and then lastly Gordon Teichner when we did this other trial. Some interesting one. So we went through those first trials and came up with some really pretty cool results and some pretty neat interventions. And so we thought we'll do it with dual diagnosis, conduct disordered kids who are also abusing drugs, and we applied a lot of the same family behavior therapy techniques and put that together. And what was interesting is the results came up significantly improved and tremendous, and our control group, but no different than our control group in these outcomes. And I think that's the first time that's ever happened to him. So he was perplexed. Like, he was like, well, how the heck did that happen? And what had happened was we had taken Alan Kasdan's problem solving and stripped it of all the behavioral aspects, and we thought, that would be a really good comparison because it has all the steps down in there, but it doesn't have the behavioral rehearsal. And he was just perplexed at how that was, so effective. Well, as it turns out, like about 15 years later, they published a meta-analysis, and those two interventions, the FBT and then the other one, were that had highest effect sizes of all interventions. So the control group that that he had actually developed in his brilliance, he sincerely tried to make something theoretically different that would be a nice comparison, and he did, and it came up so successful. So it's just fascinating, how he operated. What I liked about, and I would like to tell you just a little bit about his innovation, because if you talk to anybody, they'll tell you that he was just so ahead of everybody else. I remember talking with John Lutzker, who was probably the person when it comes to the field of child neglect. Everybody respects him, and he was a pioneer in that field certainly. And I remember talking with him, and he was saying, "Oh, but you don't know what it was like, back when when he was really motivated." And I said, "Really motivated?" Because I'd be on the phone with him until 2 or 3 in the morning. As many of us had. I know Ted told me last night about some stuff that where he had to say, "Oh, I can't anymore, Nate." So I just can only imagine what it was like, back then. But at any rate, gosh, I forgot where I got thinking of a sentiment here. So, but anyway, so what I was going to say is that in terms of his innovation, what I used to love is we get to these meetings, like you guys were saying, and we kind of it was really interesting. Like we kind of sit around this table, and we basically we'd have a problem, and a lot of times he'd define the problems by having us go out to a community member and say, what is your problem? What are the problems that you're experiencing in your agency? And I always thought that was just so cool, because what it does is it keeps your research always innovative and always contemporaneous, because you're always going to be ahead of the game. Because if there's been something that's been what we're now calling evidence-based, they would know it already, and they wouldn't have an issue with it. So I thought that was really cool. And then once we found that problem, then he'd send us out, and we do our literature reviews, and we find out what kind of evidence had been shown to be effective. And he really was never interested in fields that anyone had shown, a lot of work, because that wasn't pioneering. That was just something that's already, we've got a good handle on it. We need these things that no one wants to tackle. at least initially. And I thought that was always cool because, the pioneers are the ones that, that really are challenged to do that and want to. So, once we found out, what the problem is, we go out literature, we get all the different interventions that were existing, we'd start doing that. And then what we do is we'd sit around the table and we'd start to chalk up, what that intervention is going to look like, literally like a step-by-step. And then he'd send all of his therapists out and say, now try it out with your clients. And, we try it and we come back and we'd have this, this meeting where he'd say, okay, what happened? What worked? And then we brainstorm all the things that were working, and then we talk about different solutions to problems that happened. And if it just happened just one time, and I always, as grad student, you write those things up until late at night, you come back the next morning, it gets destroyed, totally taken out of, put into a different perspective, and you'd be frustrated. Oh, I could do it again? And he'd say, yes, absolutely. So we go out and we do it again until it was like perfection, until not one client that was seen by all of our therapists, we had to have no problems whatsoever before it would finally get accepted, and we then go to another area, and then in the process would continue. So by the time we got done with this outcome study, we'd have this brilliance, this really cool stuff. And he always had a hierarchy of sorts, not formalized like you see in a lot of agencies, but pretty much he'd say, you're the leader, and that person would basically be the most senior person usually, because he always had this importance of the person that's been around the block for a while, that's been there, that's the person that pretty much leads everything. And everybody else is pretty much the same position, except for the newbies. I remember my first time getting there, basically, they'd be asking, going over their clients and whatnot, they'd say, Nate would say, well, what do you guys think about this? And then I'd say, oh, I think we could do whatever. And he pretty much put me on extinction. And then for a while, basically, after I started seeing clients and doing that, then he would come back with, I'd earned my respect. I don't know if he got that from his military experience or what. But then once we had that happen, it would work, and we'd kind of go from there, and then finally put it to test in the control trial. But, I know I'm running out of time here, and I've got so much that I would love to tell you guys, but, I just like to conclude just by saying that, it really is incredible, how incredibly reinforcing that he can be. Because you get up there and never, ever say, I don't think I've ever heard him say anything negative about anything. How can you do that? If you think about it, how could you talk about something so critical, always critical to the process and critical to, perfection, and always wanting, to better and better and better the process, but never critical to the people that were generating the solutions. And I always thought that was just so, inspiring and motivating. So, it just, was incredible, great experience. Thank you.